Hello everyone, welcome back to another video on the JayBee Milly channel. I am JayBee and today I'm going to be breaking down every single Easter egg that I found in the brand new Scooby-Doo movie Trick or Treat Scooby-Doo. So a bit of a disclaimer before we start. I don't claim to be a Scooby-Doo expert, at least not a classic, of the Scooby-Doo Where Are You original series, which of course is what a lot of this movie draws inspiration and pays homage to. So if there's anything that I do miss, I'm almost counting on the fact that I've missed quite a bit, so if you want to go and leave in the comment section some of the stuff that you found that I missed out of this list, then please do let me know. So hopefully by the end of the day, this video will serve as a full list of Easter eggs that appear in the movie. So yeah, let's get straight into it. The first Easter egg is of course the appearance of the Catman, or I guess the Cat Lady in this case. So this monster originated from Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo show in the episode The Old Cat and Mouse Game. It isn't a direct translation of course, because there's that kind of swap and of course it's missing the classic shoes, but it's definitely at least paying homage to that character, and definitely you can see where the inspiration came from. The next Easter egg that we found is, I guess, kind of more of a homage than anything else. So if you look to the left hand side of the screen, you'll recognise that there's the screenshot from Trick or Treat Scooby-Doo. Because they're in the snowy landscape, they're donning their winter outfits, and then if you look to the right hand side, it's their classic winter outfits. Now, this isn't exactly the same. I think the closest that you've got is actually Velma, who's wearing more or less the exact same thing. But of course, as we know, Velma doesn't really change her outfit up that much anyway. Other than that, you've got Daphne wearing pretty much the same thing, except seemingly wearing a more consistent shade of pants versus her in the classic series where she's kind of wearing that more lavender colour. But regardless, I am confident that this is a homage to their original, their kind of classic winter outfits, and you can clearly see that there's definitely some similarities. Although, Fred's kind of very different in the two of them. I mean, comment down below which winter Fred do you prefer. That's going to be definitely an interesting conversation that we can have as a community. Okay, next up is kind of a big one. And this is going to kill, I guess, two birds with quite a few stones here, as these characters and these monsters not only get referenced within the opening, but they are consistent throughout. So if I don't mention every time we see Captain Cutler or every time we see, the Black Knight Ghost, it's simply because it's all going to be covered within this section here. So we can see, starting from the top left of the grid going down in columns, we have the Catman as first seen in Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo in the Old Cat and Mouse Game. Down from that we see the Ghost Clown first featured in Scooby-Doo Where Are You, Bedlam in the Big Top. And down from that we have Minor 49er as first seen in Scooby-Doo Where Are You, Mind Your Own Business. Now going to the next column, starting from the top, we have the Spooky Space Kook as first seen in Spooky Space Kook. Down from there, which is kind of fitting that it's in the middle place, considering that this is where we started the journey 50 plus years ago in Scooby-Doo Where Are You, What a Night for a Night, of course featuring the Black Knight. So down from there, I don't know what it's called, the Phantom, the Ghost, the Ghoul. It's basically your bog standard sheet ghost as seen in Hassle in the Castle. Now going to the final column, we have Redbeard's ghost as first seen in Scooby-Doo Where Are You, Go Away Ghost Ship. We then have Charlie the Haunted Funland Robot as first seen in Scooby-Doo Where Are You, Foul Play in Funland. And then finally, but last but not least, we have Captain Cutler's ghost as first seen in Scooby-Doo Where Are You, A Clue for Scooby-Doo. So they are kind of used consistently, so that's just absolutely amazing. And now going into the factory, for all I said that we weren't going to repeat every time we saw them, I do think it's interesting that they'll set out this scene in particular to showcase a lot of the classic villains, which I don't think we get a lot throughout the movie, surprisingly enough, especially not in this scene. You'd have thought that this scene more than the others would have been a perfect time to go, here we have this villain, that villain, that villain. But regardless, we see the Ghost Clown in one of the mannequins to the background. Next to that, it looks like more of a spaceman from a distance, but I think we can infer that it's evoking the vibe of the Space Kook. Shout out to the photo of Esteban on the wall there. And there's kind of a production line of what I think is more likely than not bog standard ghosts, but because one of the Scooby villains that we've already referenced is looking like a bog standard ghost, and we can draw connections. Next up, and again, this is a bit of a loose connection, but we have a group of Scarecrow outfits that are being tested for fire. Now, instantly I'm thinking of the Scarecrow robots from What's New Scooby-Doo, a Scooby-Doo Halloween. However, I can acknowledge if people do think it's just meant to be a Scarecrow. I just kind of thought that because it was very similar colour scheme and it was set up in a trio or maybe more than one, that it would be more along the lines of that. But who knows? Let me know in the comment section down below if you think this is an Easter egg or not. Another funny thing that you can also consider is at the start of Scooby-Doo Curse of the Lake Monster, they're talking about fire damage to Frickett Farm, and you can almost kind of say, is it being tested for fire damage because maybe the villain of that opening went back and said, right, last time I came to Mystery Inc. dressed as a scarecrow, stuff got a bit flamey, so let's make sure that doesn't happen next time. Probably not, but it's kind of funny to think. Now next up, again, this is one that I don't think it is a reference, but you can take it as a reference. So Coco Diablo gives the grand tour of her factory, and we can see that there's a gorilla costume on display. And you can make connections between that gorilla costume and the ape man from the Scooby-Doo Where Are You series, Never Ape and Ape Man. And then another one very similar to that, we have a mummy costume, which is of course one of the most common costumes in all of Halloween history, but you cannot ignore the fact that there was a very similar mummy featured in the Scooby-Doo Where Are You episode, Scooby-Doo and a Mummy 2. Now, of course, mummies have been referenced a lot through Scooby history, of course, in Scooby-Doo, Where's My Mummy, Mummy Scares Best, on episodes like that. But because a lot of this movie takes inspiration from the more classic era of Scooby-Doo, I kind of just think it's more connected to Scooby-Doo and a Mummy 2, rather than the other stuff. Now, we do advance from that, still very much classic era, but we have the 10,000 Volt Ghost from the Scooby-Doo show. I've seen somewhere that it's like connected to like the Dynamite Hour, but I know the 10,000 Volt Ghost from the Scooby-Doo show, the episode What a Shocking Ghost. It's kind of a shame, I don't know if there's a rights issue, but I think that an episode like What a Shocking Ghost, because the 10,000 Volt Ghost is more prominent, that maybe would have been a better choice to have featured in the bonus episodes of this disc, but I don't know. Going from there, we get the introduction song, which was a parody, or I guess a play on words, a kind of remix, if you will, of the Scooby-Doo Where Are You original series. So of course this is a reference to Scooby-Doo Where Are You, but because the art style of this movie is quite similar to Scooby-Doo and Guess Who, you can also interpret it very much as an Easter egg to the fact that Guess Who also paid tribute to that opening title. Through there we also get a store clerk that looks very similar to the Creeper. Of course it's not exactly the same, but I think the hair and the facial structure, it very much is meant to be like the Creeper. I think that's the point of this. We'll see this again in, I think, the next Easter egg, but these are very much, you think they're classic villains, but they're actually not. Much like how Mystery Inc. thinks they're going to get a classic mystery, but then they don't. It's just kind of something that's a bit more mundane and everyday. And I don't know, when I did see this for the first time, I did get memories of a grey Creeper. No clue if that's just me in the Mandela effect or making stuff up, but if there is a villain that looks more like this, please let me know in the comment section down below, because I do vaguely remember there being some variant of the Creeper. And of course, you had to have this somewhere in here. In the opening titles, we see music by Ryan Shaw. If you love the music in this movie, bit of a shameless plug, we had the absolute pleasure and honour of interviewing Mr. Ryan Shaw on our podcast that we do every week, where we interview people from Scooby-Doo. Link to that interview is in the description down below, along with a petition to release the full soundtrack for this movie. And if we do manage to get enough signatures on the soundtrack, is in talks of getting released, we may actually be able to name some of the scores. It's just amazing. Please do go and watch that full interview. Shameless plugs aside, we then get a witch shaking a shake sign, and this to me obviously is again another classic reference to Scooby-Doo Where Are You, which witch is which. But it's kind of interesting to think that the witch from To Switch a Witch also had that very much purple aesthetic. Now, I never really drew the connection between witches and purple, of course, outside of Scooby-Doo. So it's definitely interesting to say that a lot of the witches from Scooby-Doo have dressed in purple. Don't know if that's common for a witch or not, but it's interesting here. Again, though, I tend to favour the classic series as far as Easter egg goes, in that obviously you've got the same hair colour as the classic witch versus To Switch a Witch. I think that's more of a reference to that, but you know, once again, it could be here we have the gang thinking they see a classic villain, but then not really. So I can't take credit for this Easter egg at all. This was posted up on the r/movie details subreddit by breastronaut. Kind of funny username there, but shout out to breastronaut. So they figured out that in Scooby-Doo Trick or Treat, the address number of the Humdrum financial group is 24601, which is the prisoner number given to a character in Les Miserables. I think it was Hugh Jackman's character, which is supposedly to reinforce how miserable and, I guess, depressed that the gang are feeling at this point in the movie. Very in-depth Easter egg, full respect to whoever added that in. But I don't know. It's interesting. It is interesting. I kind of do wish that we got more stuff like that in terms of Scooby Easter eggs, but that's just me nitpicking. Oh, here we have a bit of an obscure Easter egg, and this is like another one where I'm kind of digging into things potentially a bit too deeply. But for one thing, it's interesting to know that Shaggy is sat right in front of a 2001 calendar. Now, people who are obsessed with the Scooby timeline and the Scooby canon, it's very interesting that in 2022, we have a Scooby movie seemingly set in 2001. Now, I kind of speculate that this is possibly an Easter egg towards Scooby-Doo 2002, which was predominantly filmed throughout 2001 on the tropical Tongaluma Island. Now, this may seem random, possibly not random in comparison to the Les Miserables Easter egg, but I don't know. I don't kind of want to start anything. I don't want to over-speculate, but I think it's interesting that this was the first movie that we were going to get Velma to canonically have a crush on another woman. And now when we've actually got that movie out where Velma does canonically have that crush, I don't know if it's like a link between like, oh, it should have happened then, but we're doing it now. Again, absolutely no clue, but it's interesting at the very least that this movie is seemingly set in the early 2000s. Now from there we have the prison scene. Again, there's a lot of inmates that I don't think I draw attention to purely for the fact that I couldn't quite identify them from memory. But one that I recognised instantly was the villain from Scooby-Doo Where Are You? A Tiki Scare Is No Fair. And because a lot of that is connected to the voodoo stuff, it's really kind of cool, like fun but dark to think that we have the villain here with that voodoo doll of Scooby. Kind of sinister. Don't know how he got the means to get those things in the prison cell, but regardless, he does, and it's kind of fun to see. Now next up we have one that I think I can add a bit more to the conversation than has already been done before, but we have the Skeleton Men trio from Scooby-Doo, a creepy tangle in the Bermuda Triangle. We have all three of them in that cell here, but it's interesting. There's a lot of these that have been taken from Scooby-Doo Where Are You? And a part of me thinks, well, why has this one been highlighted in particular? And I don't want to speak for any of the creators behind the scenes, but I did notice on IMDb that the director, one of the co-writers and producer of this movie, Audie Harrison, worked at Riverman Hughes Animation House during the time that he worked on Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed, which we know from our conversation with Leon Jewson that they had a major hand to play in the Skeleton Men scenes. It is very possible that the inclusion of the Skeleton Men is a homage to the work of Riverman Hughes in Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed. Check on IMDb. Again, it could be a stretch, it could be nothing, but it's a massive coincidence that I don't think anyone, at least that I've checked on IMDb or has done the interviews, has really drawn parallels to. And then of course in the cell next to that we have the woman from Scooby-Doo Where Are You? Foul Play in Funland, who tampered with Charlie the Robot A lot of people were upset when this came out because, of course, she wasn't actually arrested or apprehended at the end of that episode. So people are like, oh, this is awful. But it's just fun, right? I don't think the purpose is to connect too heavily with that lore. It was just, let's see all the villains, all the wrongdoers from the original series and stick them in the cell as an Easter egg. I don't think it's an indication of anything but that. I think it's just fun at the end of the day. And speaking of a very fun scene, we have again going back to the ghost clown. When he gets zapped by the warden's electricity, you see the coin of gold spinning around his head, which is again a fun reference in and of itself. But if you pay close attention to the dialogue, he says, "Watch the pretty coin of gold and you will do what you are told," which is exactly what the ghost clown said in the original series. Now this is a very fun one. We have a look inside Coco Diablo's cell, and on the wall facing the gang we have the Creeper, and on the wall to the right hand side we have the Space Kook. I did try and find a villain that made sense with the outfit that was on the mannequin, but I couldn't really. If anyone has their theories on what that could be, please let me know. But it's interesting to see that even in the confines of the jail, Coco was either researching her classic designs or maybe tweaking it. It's kind of interesting. Perhaps this is why we have characters like Daphne, going into the Space Kook suit, because maybe Coco does still have the means to modify these things. So this is one that, again, don't know if it's an Easter egg, but it can be taken as an Easter egg. In the background of this shot, we have a establishment, a building, titled Joey's. So this, again, could be a reference to someone that worked behind the scenes in terms of the animation department or, kind of anything like that. But I'm kind of taking it that it could be a nod and homage to either Joe Ruby or Joe Barbera. This is funny. In the Gloom Emporium, we get what is quite clearly Freddy Krueger's sweater. And what I kind of think that's funny about that is we have Gloom getting ripped into at the start of the movie by Coco Diablo for not being able to make any kind of good designs. And yet here we see that he is possibly behind one of the scariest and most well-known horror icons of all time. So kind of funny. I don't know if it is a coincidence. I do want to kind of tag people that worked on the movie in this video to see if this is actually a reference to Freddy Krueger. But here we do have a very similar looking sweater in the Gloom Emporium. And this is an obvious one. This is more dialogue than anything else, but simply the fact that Fred says, "What a night for a night," when he runs into Mr. Wickles is really, really funny as well. And of course, nice little respect and homage to the episode 1, where it all started for Scooby-Doo Where Are You back in 1969. We then have Esteban, dressed up as Minor 49er from Mind Your Own Business. In my personal opinion, the only misstep that this movie took was the fact that they didn't bring Ernst Half back as the voice of Hank. That would have been a really fun Easter egg, and again, further connective to that Monsters Unleashed movie. Now again, gotta give a shout out to key animator Christopherson Santos, who was really nice and came onto the podcast. You can find that linked in the description down below as well. But not only that, you can see that there's writing on the background of the credit scenes, and people may recognize that, especially after this video, as being the walls of the prison cell. So if you thought that the end credits were a bit random, it is in fact meant to simulate the prison cell walls, and the fact that we get photos of the whole movie, my headcanon is that because we know that the warden was hiding in the bushes, especially when Fred was making his wish, I want to think that the warden was stalking the gang throughout the movie, taking photos of what a good job he did setting up the mystery, and that when I assume he would have been arrested and did a bit of time for his involvement, especially maybe the kidnapping of Esteban. I don't know if what he did was considered a crime as such, but my headcanon is that he's just in his prison cell admiring the photos of the amazing mystery that he did, and he's really proud of it. I don't know, read into that as you will. But yeah, that is all the Easter eggs that I found for Trick or Treat Scooby-Doo. you probably found a bit more than me, so let me know in the comment section down below. And what was your favourite Easter egg in the movie? Once again, you can find all of our interviews for Trick or Treat Scooby-Doo linked in the description down below. So yeah, please like, comment and subscribe, and have a happy Halloween.